Hey, it's Ethan Skolnick. If you're listening to 3 Yards Per Carry, the best Miami Dolphins podcast out there anywhere, you're going to want to go to 5reasonsports.com. That's F-I-V-E, reasonsports.com. As you know, the 3 Yards Per Carry guys were on the Tua train before anybody, and so were we with our Tua t-shirt, our Tua 2020 that we put out early during the 2019 season. And now we've got 3 new Tua shirts courtesy of our guy, Adam Smoot. We've got two Fat Tua's Day shirts, and also a Tua's Day is for the boys t-shirt. So some of you know the reference to that one. So check it out, 5reasonsports.com. Go to the merch page, choose any of the 4. There are 4 different colors. You can get any size you want, and they'll be delivered out to you. Again, 5reasonsports.com.
Let me introduce you to our latest sponsor, the Andre Law Firm. Andre Law can represent you or your business in a variety of civil and commercial matters. Do you have a client that has proven difficult to collect from? Andre Law also specializes in collection law and can expedite your collection on judgments from your defaulting clients. The principal of Andre Law Firm is Tony Andre, a North Miami native with years of experience representing businesses and individuals throughout the state of Florida. Based in Aventura, you can give him a call at 786-708-0813 or visit his website at andrelaw.com. Again, give Andre Law a call at 786-708-0813 to set up your consultation.
All right, I want to talk to you about a new sponsor of ours, and it's one that is very relevant to the moment. They're a new division of Greenview Construction, and they are called Making America Clean Again. Making America Clean Again holds certificates in bacterial, viral, fungi, and mold cleaning treatments. They offer professional cleaning, sanitizing, disinfecting, and sterilization services to a wide range of residential and commercial projects. You can do overnight ozone UV generator treatments or even permanently install UV ionized advanced oxidation technology into your HVAC system. Now, we know and understand, and quite frankly, we hope, that businesses across the state and nation remain shuttered as long as absolutely necessary to beat back the spread of the coronavirus. But when that time finally comes, having that certificate to display at your workplace showing that it has been properly cleaned by a licensed professional and maintained will go a long way to restoring that customer trust. So for more information, you can look up Making America Clean Again. You can go to their website at www.macainc.net, or you can just call them at 855-561-6653. Again, that's 855-561-6653.
Welcome to 3 Yards Per Carry, a podcast covering the Miami Dolphins and the NFL. Now, here's your hosts, Chris, Alf, and Simon.
And we're on, and welcome to a reactionary edition of 3 Yards
Celebratory.
Absolutely.
This is the greatest episode we're ever going to make.
Yes. And as you can hear, there is Simon, there is Chris. Everybody's here because everybody's here because everybody's here, and they got the guy. We'll talk about the other picks, but
we
they
got
the guy.
Simon, but yeah, Austin Jackson. That's what the celebration's about.
As soon as they got Austin Jackson, I said they're starting to turn things around down here. You know what I mean?
Listeners, you can't see it, but Simon's actually doing video for this podcast, and he's got his Austin Jackson 2020 shirt.
Miami Austin 2020.
Yeah,
Simon.
that's right.
Simon, I got to go to Simon on this. Give me the run up to that pick. You were pretty nervous. You showed up on the 5 Reasons Sports draft show yesterday wearing a Trevor Lawrence jersey.
Hedging my bets, brother.
Yes. I saw what you were doing. Don't think that I don't know what you were doing. You were trying to do that reverse jinx thing, and it worked, by the way, because they took
my girlfriend was furious at my flip flopping, and she said I was an absolute disgrace given how much I'd poured into Tua for the last 4.5 years. Yeah. Oh, I was nervous, man. I was so nervous. Nervous because it was just so important. It's so important, and we've watched this guy. Almost a distraction, but we've never wavered. The three of us have never wavered, even for, if we go back into our famed WhatsApp chat and, talk about the first time we ever actually mentioned him, it's the same as when we first ever mentioned Trevor Lawrence. You look back and we've never wavered from that point, God, wouldn't it be good to get our hands on this guy? He's incredible. It's never going to happen. And then, maybe it is going to happen. And then sharing of clips, you know, there must be 50, 60 Tua clips. Have you seen this? Did you know, all of us on a Saturday afternoon, you know, messaging each other going, oh my God, you know, did you just see this throw? And look what he just did here. And, you know, so it was just a culmination of such a lot, you know, for all of us. For me, you know, I was told about him 4.5 years ago. The culmination of a journey, just knowing that, you know, this kid is special. You know, you go back and look at the Elite 11, and I don't know if anybody's ever watched the documentary, but, you know, he turns up to the Elite 11 kind of trials, as it were, and he gets absolutely reamed by Trent Dilfer for the way that he plays. He goes away for 2 months, comes back, and Dilfer's like astonished at how he's changed his game completely. He wins Elite 11. You know, just the way he takes to coaching, there's just everything about him. You know, last night in the press conference, you know, I'm going to get all the team numbers of every player. I want to phone every player up, start building relationships with, you know, just oozes leadership. It was just such a big day for the future of the Miami Dolphins yesterday. And, you know, certainly with the 5th pick, they absolutely nailed it. And look, you know, we're quick to jump all over Chris Greer when things go badly, and they have gone badly for many years. I think that the job that the Dolphins have done in creating the smoke and the insecurity and the whatever it was, the nervousness for fans certainly, but you know, nobody knew what they were doing really. You know, were they trading up for Andrew Thomas? Were they trading up for Joe Burrow? Were they trading down? Were they going to take Herbert? Yes, they were taking Herbert. Nobody, you know, Albert Breer talking about nobody knows. I've not found a single scout who thinks Miami are going to take Tua. Nobody really knew. And then they sat, and even then, people were like saying, oh, you've got to get to 2 because Washington are going to take him. You've got to get to 3 because Detroit are going to take him. You've got to get to 3 because somebody's going to jump over you. You've got all these picks. Well, we kept every single pick. We smoked every other fucker out of the hen house, and we stayed where we were, and we still got the guy that 2 years ago, Rich Eisen said, I was told at the draft 2 years ago that the Miami Dolphins were going to draft, that they were all in on Tua Tagovailoa, and that's exactly what we did. So kudos to Chris Greer and his team for creating so much misdirection.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, it's just a happy day.
Well, Chris, I think we talked about it yesterday. I was saying what I've been hearing all of this time, which was, you know, they don't really want to move up, but they will, and this is the guy that they want. I was certain to the point where I predicted it like 3 times on Twitter, and I said, watch, this is what's happening. I was certain that Detroit was going to hold us up for something, for an asset somewhere. And as it turns out, they could have gotten their guy, and they could have taken a 2nd-round pick from us. Chris, why do you think it didn't happen that way?
I mean, Detroit was left out in the cold with no offers. That's why, you know, and I think that there was a lot of talk, I think, internally and, you know, externally about that happening. And I think that Detroit was very much trying to get that done. And they were trying to throw a lot out there. And Miami never, I mean, they called their bluff. And I was starting to get like messages and stuff during the draft about what was going on in Detroit and what was thinking about happening. And, you know, as soon as I heard Detroit's thinking about taking Tua and negotiating afterwards, then I was like, that's it. They're done. You know, they've got nothing. They're desperate at this point, and they've got nothing on the line. And this is just BS at this point. So, so yeah, at that point, calling their bluff was the right thing to do. And I just can't believe it. Go back. I mean, how many times do we argue? You know, how many times do we argue, Simon, back and forth about whether the Dolphins can get Tua, you know, even if they try and pull off this organic tank thing, you know, unless they purposely lose games, the coaches try and lose games, you know, make the tank call, make the zero blitz call right before halftime, you know, that sort of thing. Unless they do that on purpose, you know, they can't really count on getting Tua, because, you know, how many times we go back and forth, you know, yeah, they're bad, but, you know, just because you're bad doesn't mean you get number 1 overall pick. And it didn't work out that they got number 1 overall pick, but it did work out that they got Tua, you know? Yeah. And so which is mind-boggling, I think. And we go back, and, you know, there have been several quarterbacks that I've just been over the moon for. And a lot of people ask me, you know, just just how good do I think Tua is. And I go back to, I was over the moon for Kyler Murray. He ended up offensive rookie of the year. I think he's going to be a great quarterback. I think he's got a lot of talent. I was over the moon for Patrick Mahomes, obviously, Andrew Luck. Those, draw a straight line basically.
Yeah.
And that's who you're talking about with Tua Tagovailoa. I think he's left-handed Drew Brees. I don't know where I do wonder where he's at physically with respect to his mobility and whether he'll run a bunch or, that sort of thing, whether we can run the sort of, keepers and RPOs and stuff like that with him. Because we're going to try and probably protect his hip a little bit. So I don't know where we're at that way, but it doesn't matter because he's such a good passer. And I think that he won't lose the mobility with respect to evading the rush. I mean, that's still going to be there. And just, and Simon, you said coachability, and that's the point that I keep trying to make to people. And it's the reason that I'm higher on Tua than Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
And always have been and continue to be, is because Joe Burrow will admit that in 2018 he didn't play well, and they ask him, why do you think Mel Kiper had you as like a 6th round pick or whatever coming into 2019, and he's like, because I played like crap in 2018, and he admits it, and that was under a different offensive coordinator in LSU, but with mostly the same talent around him. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's important because, he was an older player in 2019. He had virtually no class load. So he could spend all day watching film with Joe Brady. Joe Brady designed a brilliant offense for him. It was wide open.
Yeah, it's the old men versus boys thing.
Yeah, it was wide open. There was 5 receivers on virtually every snap, and hurry up, no huddle to boot. So, I mean, it was perfect for and using a lot of the shallow middle and stuff. It was perfect for Joe Burrow.
Yeah, it's the reason why juniors and seniors hardly ever get drafted in the NBA or get drafted very, very late, because usually it's men versus boys.
Yeah. So I think he had that going for him. Go ahead.
Go on. No, you go. You finished.
Yeah, so he had that going for him, but in the comparison to Tua, who has succeeded at every stage of his career at Alabama with every coordinator, and I think that's important because he's had a bunch of different coordinators, he had a bunch of different offenses, and the change that he made from 2018 to 2019, you can't understate it. You can't understate philosophically what a difference the offense was in 2019 compared. So they asked him after setting a record for passer efficiency in the FBS in 2018, they asked him to completely change offenses. They still had talent, but it was a completely changed offense, and he did even better. He had an even better passer efficiency rating in 2019. I mean, who does that? Yeah. And that's what I think. That's the difference.
2 of the greatest 5 seasons in the history of college football.
Absolutely.
Right? History of college football. And people, even last night I had people messaging me going, look at the receivers he played with, look at the line he had, look at the backs he played with. He played with Devonta Smith, who's going to be a first-round pick next year. He played with Jalen Waddle, who's going to be a first-round pick next year. He played with Ruggs and Judy, who are both first-round picks. He played with Jedrick Wills, who's a first-round pick. Alex Leatherwood will be a first-round pick next year. Najee Harris, all true. What did Joe Burrow do? Because you never hear the argument about Joe Burrow. Joe had a great year. Joe was amazing. He was amazing. He was, and I think I was probably higher on him earlier than you two boys. And, but I mean, God, that happens all the time. I'm lower on guys and you guys are not. That's just the way it turns out. But, let's not take away from the fact that the LSU offensive line won the Joe Moore Award as the best line in college football. Sadiq Charles would have been much higher if he'd not had off the field issues. Lloyd Cushenberry's probably going to go in the second round today. Damian Lewis as well. And then you look at the skill position players. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a first pick. They had the number 1 rated running back in the state of Louisiana as a freshman last year, backing up CEH. And then look at the receivers. Jamar Chase won the Blitnikoff and is going to be a top 5 pick next year unless something terrible happens. Justin Jefferson was a first round pick to the Jaguars. And Terrace Marshall as well could end up going up, in the first couple of rounds next year as well. Plus,
Thaddeus Moss is going to get drafted.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Stephen Sullivan's going to get drafted.
Yeah.
So, let's just be a little bit cautious about all this. The ball has still got to get to Tua, to the receivers. It's got to get there on time, in stride, catchable, in tight spaces. Oh, he only ever throws screen passes, and well, no, he doesn't. Justin Herbert threw 33% screen passes last year, fourth highest in the FBS. Tua was well down the list, and even so, that's how the offense works. That's how the RPO game works. Joe Burrow throws. Look at quarterbacks around college football and around the NFL. A completion is a completion, no matter how it happens. The things that he has, you cannot teach. You cannot teach the elite accuracy that he has. He really does. It's innate. The deep accuracy, the deep ball that he has. I mean, it was just a massive day for the Dolphins yesterday.
All right, Lana, let's wrap up the Tua part of this podcast with this. I've seen this question asked of me on Twitter, and I'll ask it of both of you. I've already made. I've said what I think about this question, but I'll ask it of both of you. Let's pretend that nothing ever existed before this podcast. So this podcast has been around since the Baker Mayfield class. Where does Tua rank among all of those quarterbacks since the Baker Mayfield class? Simon.
Oh, he's number one. I mean, I've consistently written and I've consistently said on this podcast that Tua is, for me, the best quarterback to come out since Andrew Luck, and before that, since Peyton Manning. And I'm steadfast on that. I love Trevor Lawrence. I think Trevor, I think they're 1 and 1A. And certainly, people will view Trevor as a better prospect because of his size and his physical makeup and the lack of injuries, I suppose. But for me, and coming into this season, and it stayed the same, Tua, to me, was a more advanced player than Andrew Luck was at the same stage. And I just think the Dolphins have hit just the biggest home run.
Chris?
This is a hard one. I always resist this question because, how can I go back in time and argue with myself, from a year ago, right? I mean, and that's what you have to do because hindsight leaks into your views of these players no matter what. How would I have had Tua above Baker Mayfield? Well, now I would, for sure. And I think I probably would have. But, I'd like to actually see that debate with my old self before I could know it for sure. But, yeah, I do think that he has more tools in the tool belt than Baker Mayfield did. So above him, and I was high on him, above Josh Allen, who I was very high on. The real question for me is Kyler Murray, because I was very, very high on Kyler Murray and still am. His combination of arm talent and running talent is just, and I do think he's a gamer too. And he's very accurate.
And he hasn't completely exploited his running yet.
No, not at all. And he might not ever, I mean, because he's never been what some people have always thought of him that way. He is a passer.
A lot of people thought that he was right-handed Michael Vick. I don't think he's that type of guy.
Well, yeah, no, he's not. He doesn't have to rely on the run that much, but boy, can he hurt you that way. And he was offensive rookie of the year, and so maybe this is coloring my opinion of him even more. But I'm not sure. I think it's about even. And we had arguments about this before, and people were asking me, okay, well, what about Tua next year? Because I was high on Kyler Murray last year, and they're like, well, what about Tua next year? Can you compare them? What do you say? And I'd often say they're about equal. I might give Kyler a little bit of the edge right now just because we're finding out more about him. He's going through the process. Tua hasn't. And sure enough, as Tua went on, he suffered the car crash hip injury. And went through some things. So it's very close between Murray and Tua Tagovailoa. Ranking them is sort of like picking your favorite children. I'm not sure I could do that. But I think it is just slightly a bit above Baker Mayfield, who is also one of my favorites. and certainly well above any of the other guys in the classes.
Yeah, I'm pretty much there. All right, let's move on. A funny thing happened as soon as we took Tua Tagovailoa. We spent the next 2 or 3 picks not paying much attention to what was going on, but what was going on.
Wait, did the draft not stop after pick 5?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, right. It felt that
I think we're
way.
just signing a bunch of undrafted free agents now.
Yeah, I remember at one point I went outside and I started remarking, the 49ers ain't going to trade. They ain't going to trade with us because they'll just take C.J. Henderson. And you told me he went 4 picks ago, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wasn't particularly paying attention, but I should have because.
Oh, you were paying attention when Jordan, what's his name, got drafted in the first round, and
yes, I did.
In your face, in the face.
I told you he can play. You called him a bum, Chris.
He did it in the face.
He's a first-round pick to the Seattle Seahawks. All right, so obviously Jordan Brooks can play. He can play football. Okay. But forget about Jordan Brooks. What started happening was these tackles started bouncing toward 18.
Oh man!
And they were and Tristan Wirfs not on the. Nobody's taking Tristan Wirfs.
You're gonna hurt me
Bills
now.
is still there. Of course, they all started getting taken. I'm told that the Dolphins had next to zero interest in Jedrick Wills,
which is surprising.
It is.
And it's not what I had heard before the draft. I had heard that they did, but
now Tristan Wirfs makes it to 13, and what a draft pick for Bruce Arians. Okay, you got a 5,000-year-old quarterback, but you got to figure he's going to be effective with all of those weapons that he has there. They had a hole at right tackle. That hole is filled. Man, we couldn't get in there. I'll go to you first, Chris. Like, are you a bit disappointed that the Dolphins couldn't get into that spot for Tristan Wirfs?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you have to be. Taking aside the exuberance that we all feel after Tua, after picking Tua. And again, I just can't emphasize enough. He's right in front of you, and you're like, they actually took him. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, taking aside that would have been such a home run to me. Because that's the question. I mean, if there are any questions coming out of this draft, it's like, we'll get to Austin Jackson in a second, but what did we really do for the offensive line, which was atrocious last year? Yeah. I mean, it was, let's be honest about that. What did we do for the offensive line last night? And that's the question we're going to walk away with. Getting Tristan Wirfs would have really sealed it. Did we ever find out what the Buccaneers gave up for that, by the way?
Yeah, 117, 4th round pick.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't even have. I mean, the next up we could have given them was the number 70 pick, and maybe that would have been worth. I don't know, but anyway, yeah, it would have really just knocked it out of the park to start with Tua Tagovailoa, trade up and get Tristan Wirfs, and then clean up at number 26 overall, or maybe do the trade down or whatever. And I would have take Clyde Edwards-Helaire 1 pick before, or 2 picks before the Chiefs could have. That would have really I mean, get me going. But anyway, yeah, it was disappointing. I heard that the Dolphins were on the phone with the San Francisco, competing with Tampa for that deal. I don't know if it's actually true or not, because you hear a lot of things, quite frankly. So I don't know if we'll ever know. But yeah, missed opportunity, I suppose. But how can you really, how can you criticize anything last night?
So Simon, set aside your exuberance at this point last night.
Yeah.
Go back in time. This has to be the one blemish of the night, right?
I think blemish is unfair, and I was low on Jackson, I suppose, but I can see the upside. The upside is great human being, great character, and that's something that they've always talked about. He's 20 years old. He's a baby. He's going to be, second contract. He's really only going to be. He's going to be the same age as some players being drafted tonight when he gets to his second contract.
That's true.
Which is a huge thing. He fits an athletic, we talked about this about Justin Herbert, but if you wanted to carve out a left tackle in the modern NFL, you'd carve out his body, frankly. Yeah. He's got great feet. He just doesn't really know what to do with his body at times. He certainly doesn't know what to do with his hands. You know, Chris and I, we certainly talked about this. We shared some video clips in the WhatsApp a few weeks ago, and certainly against AJ Epinesa and mostly against Bradley and I. You know, and Chris made a very good point about, you know, we've been comparing Ezra Cleveland and Jackson because Cleveland looks better in terms stylistically. He looks better. You know, you talk about left tackles being able to play the piano with their feet. If you imagine somebody moving up and down the keys of the piano without touching anything other than the key that you are intending to hit, that's what you want your left tackle to do. You know, and there's a certain body position. You know, Cleveland does that / did that better, but he was quite mechanic, obviously carrying the turf toe, but he was doing it better than Jackson. But Chris made a very good point that you almost want Cleveland to speed up a little bit and be a little less mechanical about it. And you almost want Austin Jackson just to slow down a little bit so that they kind of meet in the middle. And I think the coaching, and I do find it slightly dull when people go, "Oh, I believe in Brian Flores. He's going to be able to," he's a great coach, but I'm not sure he can, do everything. He's not Superman. But what I do think is you're getting a 20-year-old piece of clay, really, and you can mold him into whatever you want. Now, I don't know that he's going to go and be a really good player, but I don't know that he's not. And you look at the profile, you look at the tools that he brings to the table, and certainly there's an awful lot to work with. But he does need work. He needs strength work, and he just needs to know what to do with his hands and feet. But if he can get that sorted out, then the sky could be the limit for this guy. And they talk about him in really high regard. And obviously, he didn't have a preseason, as it were, in college football last year because he was giving up the bone marrow to his sister to essentially save his sister's life. Played in pain with the hip in the early portion of the season because I'm sure it's not easy having bone marrow taken off your hip. So yeah, look, I'm not over the moon with the pick, but I am aware that there is a bigger picture, and the bigger picture is the kid is 20 years old and the upside is massive. He's a high, all three of the guys, high ceiling prospects.
Yeah, and I've said enough about Austin Jackson and my surprise of him arriving in the scene as far as a first round pick. So, but yeah, it's interesting what you were saying about his body position. And if you're a listener, try to picture this. Picture yourself sitting on a bar stool and moving the bar stool backwards, and then having somebody pull the bar stool out from under you and you not fall down. That's, I think, where Austin Jackson lacks a little bit. I'm not saying as far as athleticism, because he's plenty athletic, but technique is going to be an issue. And that's why I said last night, I have my doubts whether he plays a lot in year one. Chris, you said he's a starter day one.
Yeah, well, first off, they don't have anybody at left tackle, period.
Well, that would help him. That would help him play. Right.
So, they don't have anybody at left tackle at all unless they just go ahead and stick Eric Flowers there. And we've talked about that on the podcast. I believe, I think you guys are like throw up every time I say it. But, I believe that he is an emergency option at left tackle. He's played there before, and it wasn't as bad as it was last year for the Dolphins with, some of the guys that they trotted out there. So I think, that's going to help him certainly play immediately. But I'll say this, Simon mentioned he was only 20 years old. I mean, we saw him, his 2018 tape. You're going off 2 years of tape, really, because in 2019, obviously, he didn't even have an off season, and coming off having donated, hip bone marrow, he wasn't even going to be physically all right. And so you're going to have to look at 2 years of tape, and you're looking at the 2018 tape, and you're like, man, he's just 19 years old here, which is really something. But for all that we talk about, and I wish you would be more patient, and I wonder if that's a trait or if that's a coaching point. He was productive. I went over this last night. In terms of pressures given up, I mean, I have from Pro Football Focus, I have a total of 14 pressures given up on 562 pass block snaps. And that percentage is right there, right there with Andrew Thomas. I mean, it's right there. And it's right there with Jack Driscoll, who I also really like at Auburn.
Yeah.
It's right there with Alex Leatherwood. You're looking at the guys that's right there. It's right next, literally identical to Ezra Cleveland, who has the better technique. I mean, we admit it. It's definitely better technique, better hands, better sit, better patience, certainly. So the sky is the limit with him. And you see him, I likened him to you guys earlier as he's like a lengthier version of Billy Turner, except the difference between he and Billy Turner is I think Billy Turner had some things going on sort of off the field and in the locker room that sort of prevented him from reaching his full potential. But this guy, supposedly, from everything we hear, is a phenomenal character. I mean, and that's what the theme of the night really is: phenomenal characters. But for the Dolphins, and I think that's going to continue to be a theme. But yeah, I mean, so okay, let's stack it up. He was 19 and 20 years old, and did really well, and was as productive as anybody out there, just about. He's got this incredible, he moves like a basketball player. He's monstrous and lengthy and moves like a basketball player. And he's a great character. It's like, oh, but aside from that, he's trash. It's sort of like, those are some really big points in his favor. And so it's no wonder that people did consider him to be a first round pick. I mean, you listen to Louis Riddick and guys that are very respectable out there, and they talk him up quite a bit. Were there other guys that I liked more? Yeah, but were there guys that have the ceiling that he does? I likened him last night on the show, the live show. If they nail him, if they teach him, then he does remind me of Tyron Smith and Trent Williams. I mean, that's the sort of athleticism that you're talking about with that guy on his frame. So yeah, it's definitely an upside pick. It's not a 2021, or sorry, it's not a 2020 pick, and neither is Tua for that matter. So I think it's interesting as we go forward. Maybe that's a theme that we need to discuss. But
yeah, Daniel Jeremiah, who had a horrific day, by the way, trying to slot guys into teams. He had a horrific night, but he said something that I found profound on Austin Jackson. He said this guy's improvement can be exponential due to his age and experience. So yeah, this is as good an upside pick as you can make. I thought that there were better options. Evidently, Josh Jones can't play in the NFL because everybody hates him.
Well, he's the opposite, right? I mean, he's a guy that was old when he had his breakout year.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
He was an older
player
player
against as well.
And who's he played against, and who's he played. Now, the one thing that was fighting against that narrative and in his favor is he went to the Senior Bowl and did all right,
ripped it up. Yeah.
Yes. So that plays in his favor, and I think he's going to go very early. In fact, I think Cincinnati could take him right away with this first pick. But it's complete opposite. It's complete, and Ezra Cleveland's a complete opposite too. He's a guy. Yeah, he's, as you said, technically. His feel for it is so much better at this point. And he also moves around pretty well. Like, he tests well as far as agility and all that stuff goes. But, he doesn't play like it. He doesn't play with that sort of wild athleticism. He doesn't look like a thoroughbred out there.
I think it's worth saying as well I think it's worth saying as well that, this is a kid, his sister has something called Diamond-Blackfan anemia, which is a genetic condition that essentially causes the bone marrow not to produce red blood cells. She was dying. She'd been taking blood transfusions since the age of 12. There were no bone marrow matches anywhere to be found. He was the closest thing. And essentially, he saved her life. He took time off from football. He's come back now. It was clear that there were going to be some bumps in the road given everything that had happened. He's apparently he's a kind of quiet, very rarely does interviews, but apparently a kind of quiet leader of the locker room at USC. Clay Helton loved him. I just think, the kid that he could flower into in professionally as a player, I think, is the thing that the Dolphins are bought into. But he's going to, like Chris said, I think he's going to have to get on the horse early, and there may be some tumbles along the way. But the profile is definitely arrow up.
But you know what impresses me about the story about saving his sister? I think most of us, I mean, it is like an incredible story. I think most of us would have probably done the same for our sister, right? We'd all do it. But you know what actually impresses me, just from a football asset standpoint, is he did it, and then he came back. He came back to football and was playing right away, even though he didn't have an off season, whatsoever. He slid right back into his work, and I think that bodes well for him as a football player. I mean, certainly as a human, saving your sister's life, that's great. And we love to draft great human beings because it does bode well. But also just the work that he put in to get back right away after that donation, or after that transplant, I think that says something.
Yeah. Well, they moved on from there, and then Chris Greer, waved his magic wand and got the Packers to move up to take Jordan Love, and that's worthy of an hour podcast in and of itself. Mm-hmm. But evidently they got the guy that they wanted, and they targeted all along. I'm going to try to pronounce his name correctly. Noah Igbinoghene. No?
Igbinoghene.
Yes.
Noah Igbinoghene.
Yes.
Okay.
Igbinoghene.
Okay. They're kind of completing that secondary now. This is our nickelback this year. He starts. He plays a ton of snaps right away.
Yeah, I love the pick, and I said to you earlier on, and I can't tell you who the player is, but the Dolphins the Dolphins had somebody else in mind, and that player went before the Dolphins got to pick. But he was, the team were out in force at the Auburn Pro Day. We know they spent a significant amount of time with him,
yes,
and really liked him. And you only have to look at the film. He's only been a corner for 2 years. The upside is huge. You watch the Florida game. Look at how he covers Van Jefferson, for example. He is a really, really good player. And I had lots of people last night going, "Why have we taken a nickel cornerback? This is ridiculous." We had 5 DBs or more on the field 71% of the time. Nickel defense is base defense, people. You have to remember that, okay? He is going to be playing an awful lot of football very quickly. And you listen to Gus Malzahn, you listen to Greg Brown, the secondary coach. There's a great quote here from Greg Brown. It's, when he moved over from wide receiver to cornerback 2 years ago. And he says, look, he's got big-time speed. He can open his hips. But he's got such a competitor's mentality. Noah is such a tough guy. Individually, this is one of the toughest players I've ever been around. Players love being around him. It was such a good fit for us, and he is a match made in heaven. We're ecstatic to have Noah playing cornerback for us. And then you flip that, and you've got the wide receivers coach saying, I was seriously borderline depressed. I was like, man, I've just lost Noah. He's such a competitor. Well, that's 2 coaches immediately saying competitor. And then you've got a quote from Gus Malzahn saying he's one of the most competitive players I've ever had at Auburn. And he had Cam Newton. He had, there's been a hell of a lot of competitive players who've gone through Gus Malzahn's hands over the last few years. Derek Brown, all those sorts of guys. So, and you just watch him on tape. We talked about it. You see a guy, his abilities to click and close. A guy can play inside, outside, long arms. He's got, really good movement skills, very athletic. Chris, I know, we've banged on about him since we first saw him. He's, I love this as a pick for the Dolphins. I really do.
Yeah, and I got to say this. A lot of people were asking earlier on the 3 yards per carry account, like, we don't know too much about this guy. Which game should I be watching? Watch the Florida game. This guy fights. Like, this guy will fight you for 60 minutes.
They threw at him twice. He knocked both balls away. They just gave up.
Yes. Yeah, he's like, if you liked the feistiness of a Bobby McCain, you're going to like this guy, okay? He's a guy that will fight you for 60 minutes. Effort is never going to be a problem for him. Chris?
Nor is confidence going to be a problem. That was what stood out to me. And it's a combination, I guess, if you have to look at it and think about who he is as a corner and what's so attractive about him. Well, first off, it's his movement skills, because the man is fast as hell. And he's really agile. I mean, he opens his hips very well, and he can keep up with slot corners. He can also play on the side, or on the perimeter, and I think that's kind of a special combination for him. He reads a little bit small sometimes 5'11", 198. But that's probably the only chink in the armor, because it's the combination of movement skills, the son of two, Olympic quality track and field stars. His mother was a bronze
won a
medalist.
medal. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, she's a bronze medalist. I mean, that's so he's got great movement skills. And then the other thing is the competitiveness and the killer attitude and the feistiness. It shows up in his physicality, but it also shows up in his confidence. Man, is he confident in his own speed and his own ability. And that allows him to be patient, because he can be really patient out there as a corner. And that's so important when you're, either playing man coverage and trusting your technique or playing in zone and not getting ahead of yourselves and end up giving too much space. He's a really confident player. You say which games I watched. I was trying to catch up on these corners a little bit late because I always wait for the last minute to catch up on the corners. I started catching up on him, and I'm just blown away. I mean, watch any game, and you're going to see the traits that you love
against
about
Justin Jefferson. I mean, he
yes,
Justin
absolutely,
Jefferson really, really well.
Yeah, and he got jobbed in that game with some bad penalties too, as I recall. So, I mean, it was just watch his competitiveness, watch his movement skills, watch the way that he dogs people, over the middle in slot coverage. And knocks the ball away. I mean, he's a stud. Now I'll finish up with this because this is as it relates to Brian Flores. I have a scouting source that tells me, that had heard already, that Flores considers Noah, and this is a quote, a fucking stud, and this is, and he just fell in love with him. And I think it had to do with that Auburn Pro Day that we heard about. Where, Flores kind of quizzed everybody like as if they were his NFL players and, really treated the room and peppered them with all these questions and stuff like that, and he gave them like a game plan and had to and wanted to see how they digest it. I mean, this is the guy that came out of that exercise. That's the takeaway. And the other thing is just one thing. And, when this was pointed out to me, between Austin Jackson and Noah Igbinoghene, neither of them can buy a beer yet.
No, very true.
These are young players. These are young players with great upside. Tua only just turned 21 himself. And I think that this is what you got to look at. And the other point that was pointed out to me, again, scouting contacts is familiar with Brian Flores and his thinking, is you got to really look at this as a personnel matchup issue, because it's not necessarily that Noah is going to man the slot all the time. It's about finding the right matchups, because Xavier Howard is a little bit leggy. We know that he is. And there's certain guys that he's going to match up well on, and I think maybe there are certain guys that he's not going to match up well on. And also Byron Jones can play safety. I mean, he played it really well.
And Byron Jones is actually really, really good in the slot as well. So
he can play anywhere. He can get the matchup that you want. And then you also have Noah, who particularly matches well, gives them someone to handle the smaller, shiftier receivers.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. It's a good problem to have when Xavier Howard is the only guy that you have that's completely one-dimensional right now.
Look at what the Patriots did last year. They had the best corner in the NFL in Stephon Gilmore. They had J.C. Jackson, who's a really, really good player. They had Jason McCourty, who's a really good player. And then the second round, they took Joe Williams of Vanderbilt. But there's a reason why cornerbacks go so high. It's a passing league, people. We're looking at 4 and 5 receiver sets now as the absolute norm. Yeah. The whole 3 yards per carry thing came as essentially a laugh in the face of the fact that running game doesn't really exist anymore. And if it did, that's all we've managed to muster. But all these college concepts are coming to the NFL all the time. And you look at he played in the SEC against look at the kids from Ole Miss, Metcalf and Brown. You look at the guys we've already talked about LSU, the guys we've already talked about Alabama. All these great Brian Edwards at South Carolina, Mike will probably get drafted today. All these studs in the SEC. He played 879 coverage snaps in 2 seasons, gave up 3 touchdowns. And he was a wide receiver 2 years ago. So
he just turned,
he
just converted.
And he just converted.
What would you rather have, Alf? I'll ask you, and I'll ask you as well, Simon. What would you rather have, a stud pair of corners or a stud pair of pass rushers?
Oh, stop
Wow.
Heracles.
Yeah. Right.
The corners. Yeah.
And it's not even close anymore.
Yeah. Give me the
Of course it
corners.
isn't.
Give me the corners. I'll try to outthink the offense and try to get to your quarterback. You know.
It's maybe the second most important position on the field now. And if it's not the second, it's definitely the third. Quarterback, then it's either left tackle or cornerback, and then it's pass rusher. And I don't think it's I don't think it's
the
close.
Communication and the ability that you have to have in the secondary nowadays is just is just incredible, and that's why the teams are drafting these guys so high, and they're drafting guys that are athletic and read better in coverage. That's why the safeties are coming down the board actually, and you still haven't seen one taken, is because the corners have the better coverage ability, right? Generally speaking, than the safety, and the better athleticism. And they convert corners to safety, and they have them playing all in different spots in the middle, especially in Miami's scheme, which is very man oriented. So at times there's not too much difference. There's not too much difference between a corner and a safety. So that's why they have Eric Rowe, who's a corner, basically playing safety, and Bobby McCain, who's a corner, playing safety. So taking him fuels that effort in the defensive backfield. And it's going to be hard to throw on us, hopefully. But, I think it will be. So, absolutely excited about the pick. I was very, very excited about the pick overall. I don't know about you guys, but I was.
Yeah, I loved it. Loved it.
Yeah, I like the pick. Now, moving on here, we've spent the better part of at least 3 weeks. I spent the better part of 2 months mocking a running back or a safety at 26. That didn't happen. But they do have 39, 56, and 70 coming up here today, which is when we're recording. Maybe by the time you listen to this, they already have one of these guys. Did we overlook something else, or is it happening today? Are they taking a running back and a safety today, Simon?
I'm not sure about the safety anymore. I think that might fall into day 3. I mean, I don't know. If an Ashton Davis is there at 70, if a Carl Dugas there at 70, you don't know. But I just wonder whether or not I do. We've talked about this. I think Bobby McCain is on the bubble. And you could see Bobby McCain being dealt for a 6th rounder, a 7th rounder later on, perhaps, and they do take a safety like an Ashton Davis or whatever. But the 6-7 really good safeties: Terrell Burgess, Winfield, Delpit, McKinney. All these kids, Davis, Duga, Chin, they're all on the board still. Nobody went in the first round. And I do think, look, everybody, I had so many messages last night going, this is a disgrace. We've taken this corner. Nobody knows anything. Why aren't we taking a running back? It's just like, whoa, slow down. 1 running back's gone off the board so far. 4 of the big 5 are left. And I'm pretty sure that at worst, 3 of the big 5 are going to be there at 39, and I'm pretty sure that all 4 of them are going to be there. So even if DeAndre Swift goes, they like J.K. Dobbins. You've got one of the greatest college running backs in college football history, and Jonathan Taylor there.
Yes.
Oh, and Cam Akers, the former number 1 high school player of the year, who did a pretty good job on a terrible team with terrible coaching behind an absolutely high school offensive line.
He was a hero to me.
Oh, mate, seriously. So I would be, I have to say, I would be very, very surprised if they don't take a running back at 39. I just think it's setting up that way. But, I mean, God, there's so many good players still on the board. There's so many good players still on the board. So I don't know, but it feels to me like 39 sort of has to be a running back, because I think by the time you get to 56, you might only have one of them left. So, I think Swift probably. If they were all there, I think he'd probably be the guy, but, who knows?
Yeah, Chris?
There's too many good players left, and, you want them all. And I think that's something that we have to understand and think about a little bit, is the possibility that, and we have some indications in this regard too, the possibility that they might have some more work that they think needs to be done in this receivers unit than we've been saying. And we've always acknowledged that there's room for a slot guy or something like that.
Don't rule out receivers, definitely what I've said.
Don't rule that out. Don't rule out Leviticus Chennault. I think that's
100%.
I think that they're looking, based on everything that I've heard, and I've heard that basically people high up in the organization are talking about this offense and talking about how dynamic they want to make it, how sort of multi-tool they want to make the offense.
Yeah.
And that's Leviticus Chennault. He's a multi-tool player. I mean, he's built like a running back. You can probably play him like a running back if you wanted to at certain times, but also you can put him down on the perimeter and have him hoof down the field, and my God, he's like a thoroughbred out there. So don't discount that. In addition to the running backs, I think the running backs, Clyde Edwards-Helaire going off the board is a little bit of blow because he is also a multi-tool player. He's so good in the passing game. We know that DeAndre Swift is as well. So, keep an eye on that. But they have more work to do on the offensive line. We know that. Josh Jones is still there. He's probably going to go off pretty soon. But Lucas Niang is there. Matt Pert is there. Sadiq Charles is still there. And, who knows whether he can move to the other side or play guard or something like that. Jack Driscoll is I've heard that he's taken some snaps, started to work at center a little bit. So, and he's just a phenomenal football player.
I think Jack Driscoll actually has snaps recorded at every position in his college career.
He's a phenomenal football player when you watch him. He knows what he's doing. He's like, as much as you like Ezra Cleveland, I like Jack Driscoll for a lot of the same reasons. I just really am in love with him. I think that he's
Jack Conklin 2.0.
I like him a little bit to Joe Thurman.
Yeah.
Well, I like him actually a little. He reminds me of Joe Tooney a little bit too.
Okay,
because Joe Tooney moved inside, and Jack Driscoll can move inside. Robert Hunt is still there. Matt Hennessy, Lloyd Cushenberry. I mean, there's still those nose tackle types. Josh Uche.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh.
Josh Uche is there, isn't he?
Yeah. And
Marlon Davidson. They love these Auburn kids.
Yeah.
Darrell Taylor, really good player.
I think there's a distinct possibility.
And then the safeties.
What do they think about
the safeties?
Yeah, what do they think about Willie Gay, for example? They had him on FaceTime. He's a second. I mean, if you take away the off-field issues, he's a first-round pick. Same with Marcus Bailey. What do they think about guys like that? Epenesa's still there. Yet Yito Gross-Matos is still there. There's a lot of really, really good players. And
I'll give you one right now. It's a distinct possibility. The more I look at this board, that at 56, there could be no guards taken, and you can take the best on the board, Damian Lewis at 56.
Mm.
And
Robert Hunt, Lynn Bowden. Don't rule out Lynn Bowden if they don't.
Another multi-tool offensive player.
Yeah, I've been told they're really high on Lynn Bowden.
And so, Lynn Bowden or Leviticus Chennault, it could be, if they really do feel like they've got to do some work there in the receiver department.
Yeah. Well, we got to get out of here. And I hope you enjoyed this. We enjoyed it. We really enjoyed that first pick. We've been talking about it for months. Go to 5reasonsports.com, buy the T-shirts. We got a bunch of new Tua T-shirts. You'll enjoy them. We will talk to you when this is over, and we will go over all of the picks, all 5,000 of them, because it looks like they're going to pick a lot of guys. They got 15 picks total. So we will talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to 3 Yards Per Carry. You can subscribe via iTunes, on Podbean, or your usual podcast provider.